Back in my time at JTS, the seminary where I became a cantor and a rabbi, I learned there something that had not been a part of the curriculum before my era. My father-in-law graduated JTS, and this was not a part of the curriculum in his day. That is the idea of clinical pastoral education, chaplaincy that is taught carefully as a science and a spiritual art. At the time, Rabbi Michal Springer, who is an extraordinary instructor in the realm of chaplaincy, was teaching a course during the year, and I took it as preparation for an entire unit of chaplaincy that I would serve in at the Jewish Home for the Elderly in Manhattan. In that class with Michal Springer, there was a regular exercise. Rabbi Springer would say, I need 2 volunteers. Someone who can cry and someone to play chaplain. Now, you might guess that in a seminary, the most popular role would be the chaplain. But no, everyone wanted to be the crier. Because you got to get up there and unpack, without saying a word, whatever emotions were erupting within you, and just have a good, inconsolable cry. Rabbi Springer said there's only one rule. As she set 2 chairs in the front, one for the chaplain and one for the emotional person, a stand-in for someone who we might be doing chaplaincy with. The rule is, you cannot use your body to offer comfort as a chaplain. You can't hug. You can't put a hand on the shoulder. And this wasn't about the appropriateness of physical touch in a chaplaincy setting, because in fact, physical touch is a big part of chaplaincy work. And with consent, many times I've held somebody's hand in a hard or a beautiful or a poignant moment during chaplaincy, in a hospital setting, visiting someone in recovery. But Rabbi Springer was challenging us. If you can't use your body, you can't give a hug, you can't pat on the shoulder, you can't hold them, you can't cradle them, you're not using physical touch, then what can you use to comfort? Take a look at the source sheet. I'm so grateful that Rabbi Kligfeld taught a little bit about the first verse of our Haftarah. Nahamu, Nahamu, Ami, my campgoers who know that there's a very popular melody, not just in this Haftarah, but this is a sung melody because it's such a relief and an uplift after many weeks of sadness leading up to the commemoration of the losses of the temple. And now here we are in the weeks of comfort, doubling those words as he pointed out. Nahamu, Nahamu, the 40th chapter of the book of the prophet Isaiah. It's the second line that I'm going to focus on in the teaching today. Dabru alev Yerushalayim, v'kiru eleha. Speak to the heart of Jerusalem. Call out, declare to her, Ki malat tzva'a ki nirtza avona, ki lacha miyad Adonai, ki flaim bechol chatoteha. Beautiful and poetic. Tell Jerusalem, tell the people, but really, tell Jerusalem, the city, that her term of service is over, that her iniquity, that which she transgressed, it's forgiven. Expiated is a very fancy word for that. Because she has received at God's hand double for all her sins. What did Jerusalem get doubly for her sins? Destruction. So, in other words, you've suffered. Remind them you've suffered enough for your transgressions. What does this phrase, Dabru el Lev, mean? I'll take one or two folks who would like to take a stab at a translation or a meaning. Anyone want to share what they think Dabru el Lev might mean? You can be literal, figurative, bring some source you read this week. Spoken to the heart. All is a preposition that says either on or to, right? So spoken to the heart. But we're missing pronouns or proper nouns. We just don't know who the actors are, right? Dabru, I mean, we know the recipient, but we just don't know who's saying it. here, really, unless you rely on the previous verse and we don't know who's receiving it. Speak to the heart of Jerusalem. Great, literal. What else could it mean? Dabru el lev. We can also ask the commentators what they think. I want you to skip the next commentary, and we're going to take a look at Ibn Ezra and what Ibn Ezra thinks about this. Ibn Ezra lived a lot of places across the 12th century, in France and Italy and even in England. And in his commentary, he hooks the commentary on the word dabru, on the spoken part. He says, le'olam dibur alev lahasir. It's always the case that speech upon the heart or to the heart, speaking to the heart, comes to eliminate or lift ha'etzav hadaga she'avra, the sadness, or as I like in the more modern Israeli translation, the anxiety or a sense of guilt that's on the heart. Speaking to the heart, this expression, he's saying it's a bitui, it's an expression. Dabru el lev, dibru el lev. Speak to the heart means come to get somebody out of a state of anxiety and of guilt. Now, in the ancient world, what did they believe the heart was the seat of? Today, we spoke a lot about love. Rabbi Schatz gave us some great framing about this idea of the ve'ahavta and love that's pervasive. But love, much as it sounds like love, the heart was connected to something else. Does anyone know? The heart was the mind. That's exactly right. Someone said something else too. Did we say the soul also? Yeah, I think that we think nowadays more of love being heart and soul, which is also a great piano song. But love in the ancient world, not just in the Jewish ancient world, the heart was the seat of where wisdom came from. So what were you speaking to? Dabru alev, in the original context, you're speaking to the thoughts, the machshavot of the person who is sitting there. I think in the context, that's what's being said here. And you're trying to help someone, according to Ibn Ezra, to minimize their sense of guilt for mistakes. Sometimes we call that helping someone to move on. That's one way of thinking about it. This is a model of comfort that Ibn Ezra says works. He says this is functional comfort. Why does God say this? Dabru alev. He's giving a mechanism. God is giving a mechanism to say this is how you get Jerusalem out of its funk. And funk is a really light word to say for a place that, if you were with us reading the book of Eicha, pretty detailed, vast, and traumatic destruction. How do you lift somebody out of deep anxiety and guilt and regret? Dabru alev. You speak to the heart. At the end of this particular Ibn Ezra commentary, I skipped a bit. Did you notice that? There's some at the end. V'chein vaydaber al libam. And thus, that's the same thing I'm saying here is also what I would say about the following quote, which is from the 50th chapter of the book of Genesis. And it's going to be the story of Joseph and his brothers. And another place where Ibn Ezra thinks that there's a functional moment, a good chaplaincy moment of comfort one to another. In order to get there, I want to go back in the story, and you'll look down the page and see Bereshit, Genesis, the chapter 37, verse 34. First, I want to look at failed nechemta. What does not great comfort look like? Anybody here, you can nod your head if you feel like it. Anybody here feel like they've received not functionally good comfort ever? I will nod my own head. Somebody has tried and failed to comfort me in the past. Somebody's in the past. And I'll tell you, in Rabbi Springer's class, many a time it did feel like we were failing to comfort because the crier was like instructed in serious improv, right? So they just kept going and we were trying. So I want to look at this failed moment. What's happening in the story? Jacob's just learned from his sons. Yaakov has learned from his sons that his favorite, Joseph, is dead and gone. They tell him a story. Maybe you've seen the musical. It's very dramatic. He rips his clothes and he puts on sackcloth. And this is how he is v'it abel. Do you see in there Avel, the mourner? This is how he mourns al beno, his son, Yamim Rabim, so many days. It doesn't say how many days, but the Torah takes the time to tell us it was a long time. He was very sad. And that sadness kept going. Vayakumu chol banav v'chol benotav. I wish I had time to unpack this phrase, because how many daughters did Jacob have? One, except it says v'chol benotav. So I like to think that this is a moment when daughter-in-laws get to shine. That's my thought. I don't know. Unpacking it in some other shiur another time. But all of these children, vayakumu, they get up, linachamo, to go comfort him. Vayma'ein lehitnachem. What does Yaakov do? Refuses to be comforted. Vayma'ein is a beautiful word, shoresh-wise, root-wise, because it inverts amen. Amen, a word of agreement. But then we get to vayma'ein. I refuse. I will not be comforted. I want you to imagine what this conversation, we know a little bit about these sons and daughters, all the ones besides Joseph. They had some interpersonal struggles. We don't see a lot of goodness coming through them. And perhaps we wonder if in that moment they were doing a great job to comfort him. I like to think of it, this is a Rabbi Chorny a take on this, not from any commentary. I like to wonder if that's why the text hedges a little bit and says, Vayakumu, they got up to comfort him. It doesn't say they comforted him. It said, they made a visit, They all came together. Maybe they had a potluck with the family, and they thought this would comfort him. Vayakumu l'nachamo, but it didn't work. He refused. Rashi has another theory. This Rashi comes from the collection by the Chorny. So in the 13th century, the Chorny gathers a bunch of different commentaries from different commentators, and here's Rashi, our 11th century French commentator, saying, you know what? I know why the comforting didn't work and why Yaakov refused. Ein adam mikabel tanchumim al achai v'savor shemet. Nobody will accept comfort on a matter that has to do with a still living person. Even though the text says v'yitabel, that he was mourning, technically speaking, the brothers and sisters are aware that Yosef is still alive, and somewhere deep in his gut, Yaakov may have known that too, says Rashi. And when someone is still alive, like for example, a hostage in Gaza, as we've heard so many times from parents over the course of the last 2 years, there is no receiving comfort because it's a means of accepting that they might be dead. Perhaps he couldn't accept this nechemta, this comfort, because he's not ready to be comforted. This is the most severe version of not being ready to be comforted. I refuse to accept that he is dead, that Joseph is dead. Is it possible here that they didn't fail as chaplains to their father? Is it possible that there was nothing that could be done to comfort him? What do you think? Is it ever possible that somebody is just in a place where they cannot be comforted no matter what? Yes, okay, I'm getting a lot of nods. It's possible, maybe, that it's not entirely on the person who's offering comfort. I find comfort in that thinking. I take comfort from the idea that it is possible that there is nothing I can do to make some people feel better. Not just as a rabbi, but as a daughter, a partner, a parent. Sometimes there is nothing that I can do. Yes, Rabbi Lazarelli. So it's like what we need is to meet them in that moment. So I'm not going to take away your pain, but I'm going to hold it with you. Right, so Vayakumu, Rabbi Lazarelli says, is this notion of they got up to comfort, which seems like an inversion of what we do. We get down with a mourner. A mourner is low. He says in another verse, I'm going to go down to Sheol. I'm going to go into the grave with my son. Maybe they were trying too much uplift, literally. Yeah, great observation, Mark. How could they comfort him? They lied to him. Perhaps it's not just a possibility that there are some people who cannot be comforted, but there's also the wrong person to give the comfort. A chaplain might be able to give them comfort, but the very people who induced the pain that they are now turning around and trying to relieve are not in a great position, maybe not any position at all, to offer that comfort. There's so much more to unpack there, but what I want to move on to is the part that Ibn Ezra referenced in the commentary on our Haftorah. Ibn Ezra said, God tells the prophets rather, how to comfort Jerusalem, and names a great way to do it. It's the Dibor al-Halev. And he points to this example of Joseph. We've fast forwarded in the story, and Joseph is now comforting his brothers. He's comforting them because they've come before him racked with guilt, having discovered that he not only survived, but has come to a great position of power in Egypt. And now they, in a place of starvation and begging, have come to him for help. I highlighted some of the words at the end. We'll skip over most of the dialogue, but I want to give you the context here. Joseph says, Ve'ata al tirau. Now, don't fear. I'm going to give you food. I'm going to make sure that you don't starve. And at the end of that verse, he says 4 words, Vaynachem otam, vaydaber al libam. And he comforted them, and he spoke to their heart. The same phrase. It's a close juxtaposition. And to Ibn Ezra, it's a proof text that the way that you go about doing that comfort successfully, you can try to comfort, you can get up to comfort, but how do you really do comforting? You speak to the heart. Does it mean that the person's ready to move on? I don't know. Let's look at the next commentary and see if that helps us to understand the answer to that question. This is from Bereshit Rabbah. It's our second to last text that we'll look at. It's an ancient midrash that takes a look at this piece of the Joseph story and the speaking. And it unpacks an idea that, again, brings me back to Rabbi Springer's class and the prohibition that we had as chaplains to use touch as comfort. Bereshit Rabbah takes this and brings it to the extreme. It says, Vaydaber al libam, look at the highlighted text. V'chi yesh lecha adam shemedaber al halev ela devarim shehen menachamin et halev. Is it really possible for a human being to speak to the heart? And he portrays this beautiful picture that no, it's not people that speak to the heart. It's the words themselves. It's the words that you leave somebody with or that you carry with you into a comforting space. He says that direct language, it's the words themselves that are offering the comfort. And then it goes on at the bottom of this particular midrash. Take a look at the next highlighted text. The text uses a kal v'chomer, an a fortiori argument. If this is true, that Joseph, who spoke these gentle words to the heart of his brothers, to the heart of the tribes of Israel, was able to successfully comfort them, Ibn Ezra says it worked, then all the more so it's the case that when the God's self came to comfort Jerusalem and said, Daber Alev Yerushalem, this idea of speak to the heart of Jerusalem, well, that worked. It really worked. I want to give us one last notion of comfort that works or maybe doesn't work. I had the incredible fortune when I was an undergrad in Washington, D.C., to have Dr. Erica Brown as a teacher. She is now a scholar in residence in the greater D.C. area and a tremendous writer of pieces of Jewish thought, usually on Parsha, but sometimes she'll take chunks of time on the Jewish calendar and write commentaries. This is her commentary on the beginning of the weeks of comfort that start now and encompass this Shabbat Nahamu. She says it's in a well-known Haftarah, the one that we read today. The verse continues with an instruction of what to say, but first specifies how to say it. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and declare to her that her time of service is over, etc., etc. Harsh words and harsher realities must be balanced by love. This expression, Dibru al-Lev Yerushalayim, speak tenderly, or speak to the heart of Jerusalem, asks us to imagine a conversation between an incorporeal being, that is God, and the city of Jerusalem. I want you to skip way down. It's the one thing I forgot to highlight, but about 12 lines, I didn't count, from the bottom of that paragraph, the word tenderness starts a sentence, and I'll read just a bit. Tenderness is not marked by how you say something, but rather by the relief that you generate by what you say. I want to say that one more time. Tenderness is not marked by how you say something, but rather by the relief that you generate by what you say. God tells Isaiah to speak tenderly, speak to the heart. This is not a solution, it is a method. So besides the fact that people may not be the right comforters, as Mark said, and besides the fact that people might not be in a position whatsoever to be comforted, and besides the fact that perhaps it's the words themselves that might offer comfort, Dr. Brown says it doesn't matter what those words are, it matters how you say them. And even more radically, she says, it doesn't matter how you say those words when it comes to your tenderness. You're trying to awaken and induce tenderness in the other person. This is not about you. This is about the person who needs comfort. And what that does is give permission, going all the way back, if you want to take a look at it, at the beginning, the first source, the second verse of our Haftarah, it gives us permission to say sometimes harsh words, dark jokes, stuff that seems spicier than you might use to give comfort, as long as those are the things that are going to bring comfort to the person who you want to comfort, and as long as those things invoke a sense of tenderness in them, they tenderize the heart, if you will, well, then those were the right things to say. So it seems that you need a combination of truth and clarity, even when you might have to be a bit brutal. The point is to have a tone that awakens tenderness in the other person. That doesn't mean we always have to be tender. We just need to do what it takes to tenderize bruised hearts. That's why comfort is not always gentle. It has to fit the needs of the recipient. And sometimes it won't work, but it's a mitzvah to try.